Go. All right, so we're back for our afternoon session, and we have the great pleasure of having my friend Reed Goossens on the line to do the next session. I know we got people still signing in as they're coming back from lunch, so we'll give folks just a sec. But anyway, this is what we're going to do, Reed. We're going to have you introduce yourself, and then we will launch into talking about what you were up to and how you were facing up with the COVID-19 crisis. And also, we'd love to talk about, to some extent, your model of doing these repositions and lease ups. That was the original, reason I wanted to have you on this session, but we got, superseded by this emergency that we all find ourselves in. So we'll talk about both. But first, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Reed. I'm sure most of the people here know who you are, but in case they don't, why don't you tell them who you are?
Well, thank you very much. And I know the after lunch slot is the hardest one to try and entice people, encourage people to have a bit more energy. So hopefully I'll bring some energy to this hour. For those people who don't know who I am, my name is Reed Goossens. I'm originally from the deep south, down under, from Australia, and I moved to the United States back in 2012. Came here to chase my then girlfriend, now wife, and to live in New York City. That was really about it. And over a very short period of time, I did realize that the barriers to entry here in the United States market are a lot lower compared to what I was used to in Australia. And I started investing and buying small, very Section 8 Class D housing, triplexes in upstate New York. And that sort of was the starting point of this whole journey. We're fast forward the clock, a lot of work, a lot of hard work, juggling a W-2 and trying to do a side hustle. And in 2017, I was finally able to quit my day job, coinciding, I should say, with my marriage to my American wife, so I could get a green card. And now I run Wildhorn Capital, and we have about 1,900 units under management, about $250 million, I think it is, in total value. And we're focused in the Austin and San Antonio market. My business partner, Andrew Campbell, he's down there, and I'm calling in from Los Angeles, Hermosa Beach. So it's not a hard game this Saturday.
Well, that's great, Reed. So I think, just sort of thinking about logically how we should structure the section, why don't we talk first, before we get into the COVID issues, let's talk through your business model, okay? Mm-hmm. Because you are, I think, a little bit unusual for a lot of syndicators out there, in that you're doing value adds, but you're doing value adds at a very high level, right? You're raising that, the renter level to, sort of Class A. So let's talk about your approach, your model, how you find deals, how you evaluate them, and how you carry out this major, repositioning that you do.
Yeah. So the finding of the deals, for a long period of time, it was doing it all myself, until I found my business partner, Andrew, who was boots on the ground. And, my saying is that he goes and shakes the lemon tree, and I determine if we make lemonade or lemon juice out of it. And so I really run the operations behind it. We've got a couple of analysts who work for us as part-time analysts. And then I also oversee the construction and the repositioning of the entire asset. That is my background. My background is in structural engineering and ground-up construction. So I have many years experience. I went to university for engineering. So I bring that sort of, I will say, sophistication to the table, institutional sophistication. I worked for many, many years for a developer in Los Angeles before taking the leap and starting Wildhorn Capital. So I've seen how the big boys do it, and I try to bring that level of sophistication to our operation as best we can, right? We're not doing ground-up construction, but we're doing a level of construction that we can try and systemize it and make sure we're streamlining it, and make sure we just truly understand the value add and where it will actually move the needle in terms of where you put your money, right? So yeah, overall, our thesis is that we like to transition properties, probably B plus into AA minus properties, and really have the psyche with the prospective tenant when they're crossing the property line and they're pulling up to the leasing center, that they're already in their subconscious thinking, I want to lease here. They can see a really lovely sign. They can see it's rebranded. It's got really lovely gardens. The amenities are, sort of hotel-like, We really renovate the leasing office to be like a hotel reception when they come in. And we've been very good at able to jam the costs down, so it looks a lot more expensive than what it is. I mean, it's still good quality, but we make sure we're not overspending. And then we put money into the amenities, and then obviously we put money into the interiors, which is where we can really systemize from everything from sourcing materials to the way in which we have more of a production line of renovations going out across the portfolio. So yeah.
So talking about the kind of deal that fits for this type of strategy, what are you looking for? What is like the deal that when you see it just goes like ding, 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 ding in your head that you got to get?
So the big thing for us is, and we've shifted a little bit. We started in San Antonio. We're now in Austin, Texas, and so we still got 9 deals, right? 8 or 9 deals in both both markets. But for us, leading up to this sort of COVID issue, and we'll sort of put COVID to one side for a second, we really wanted to invest in an area where the supply and demand issue is prevalent, meaning that you have a high barrier to entry for new product, meaning new multifamily. You have a long approval process with the city, because it takes time to get plans approved. And we want to see where the jobs are, so that the high demand is there. So supply is limited, but demand is high. So jobs, obviously, following high quality paying jobs, not just any type of job, and really having a diversification of that. We see a submarket like Austin, Texas, transitioning into, and it's pretty much the poster child of transitioning over the last 20 years into really a tier 1 city. Historically, it's been a very tier 2 city, boom and bust back in the 80s and early 90s. And then in the late 90s, the city of Austin Economic Development Board really had a vision for the next 30 or 40 years to transition the city into a more of a stable tier 1 market. We have direct flights going in and out of Austin to Europe every day. You have obviously the massive tech hub that is there, sort of the sister to Silicon Valley. So it is really a booming area. And so for our thesis, it's like, well, let's go and buy existing assets where, again, back to my supply and demand issue, where to get into the market, the price of dirt to build new multifamily, what we call core plus locations is very high. Then the approval process takes a long time. Then you've got the construction process on top of that. So when the barriers to entry to new product are limited, you then want to go and buy existing product knowing that you can have a bit of an edge because you still have that demand there from all the renters. And so thus we go in and then turn the units into a relatively high level of turn, granite countertops, undermount sinks, flush mount light fixtures, new flooring, paint, depending on the unit and the upgrades, maybe put new cabinet fronts on it, stainless steel appliances. So all that sort of stuff is very much at the forefront of our mind in terms of attracting the right type of renter, and then thus getting a really big pop on our rentals, on our renovations. So we look anywhere, but the ROI that we want to look at for those people out there taking notes is if we spend $7,000 or $10,000 a unit, and we typically spend about between $7,000 and $10,000 a unit interior wise. We want to see above a 12% ROI on a rental pop, meaning you take the rental pop of $100 to multiply by 12 and then divide it by how much you've actually put into the prop into that particular unit, and that's your return on cost. So we want to see it at above a 12%, and we typically get that above a 12%. So yeah.
So just circling back to how the submarkets that you look at. So you said you're looking for high barrier to entry with high job demand and high quality jobs. How are you researching the submarkets that you're into? So I assume that even within a place like Austin, not every location within Austin meets that criteria, or all 3 of those criteria. So how are you drilling down to identify the particular submarkets that make sense for what your model?
Good question. So we just closed on a deal just before COVID hit in early March, and it's actually our closest asset to the downtown center, but it's on an area called Riverside Parkway, and that's headed out towards the airport. And you can see out that when you're driving along there, it's a couple of miles. that there used to be prairie land, but it's now obviously starting to have density being added to it. And the city is very conscious of wanting to add density along this particular corridor. Combined with that, we're looking at what other projects are going in or being approved at the city. There's a particular project where it's actually wiping out 600 existing multifamily units within a less than half a mile radius of where our asset is, because it's building 1 million square feet of office space for Oracle, the Oracle campus, which is just there. So knowing those things is really, really important. We have a team member, a new business partner who's just come onto our team, who's been a part of the Austin Economic Board for the last 15 years. And having those types of folks with a bit of a wick in our ear telling us where we should be investing because of what the vision for the city is really, really valuable to us. And so thus we can go and identify those submarkets where we want to be in, and then go hunting for deals in those areas.
And how are you identifying the income levels of the folks? So sort of the job, like how do you drill down on that high quality job tenant base?
So part of the value add is actually transitioning that demographic. So we've got 2 existing assets before we bought this third one just recently, that when we go into the property, we will probably see the average income of around $45,000 to $50,000. But part of the value add is we want to make sure our property management team is cycling that and doing it in a way where we're getting that average income up to maybe $60,000 to $70,000. And that takes a period of time. Like, we don't want to go in and it's already at that level. We want to get it to that level. So it's through the value add, it's through the really nice renovations that we do on the interiors, it's through the better quality of management. And people say that a lot, it's, oh, you can't really squeeze blood out of a stone, but you actually can. When you have a online marketing team that is drilling down into, you know how powerful Facebook and Google is, and you can see where different people are coming from in terms of, you look at your geofencing online, you can market to those people and you know exactly how much they earn to try and attract them to your property to then lease. So we have a very sophisticated online marketing team that we partner with to make sure we are getting the right leads in order to shift that from a $40,000 to $50,000 average income up to a $60,000 to $70,000 income. And that may take 12 to 24 months. And so that's again, part of the income strategy, part of the reposition strategy that we do.
And in terms of the particular kinds of deals that you're looking at, again, aside from the market itself, which you've described, but what about the deal itself? Like, what are the characteristics of a particular asset that when it comes across your desk, you say, okay, this one is going to work with our business model? So what does that profile look like?
So it looks like a profile that it has historically been late 80s build. But we like to see stuff from a construction point of view that has 9-foot ceilings. Typically back in the 80s, they were only built to 8-foot ceilings. And so you have it just feels a little more cramped. When you have that 9-foot ceilings, where you can definitely find those assets, and we've got a couple of them in our portfolio, it's obviously an added bonus. The deal's got a pencil first. It's not just, does it have 9-foot ceilings? Yes or no? But these are some of the little nuances we look at to make sure when we do renovate, it looks like a brand new structure when you come into the renovated product, and people are like, wow, that's 9-foot ceilings, and it's actually built in the late 80s or early 90s. In Texas itself, there was you will see a lot of late 80s build product, then you don't really see anything come, from a built perspective because of the recession back in the early 90s until about 1993. So sort of between 1989 to 1993, there's not a lot that was built. And so now we're starting to look at the sort of 95, 96, 97, maybe even early 2000 builds, because they're coming into a 20 years, 25 years sort of life cycle where they need a facelift. But they have a better quality of build. They have 9-foot ceilings. They have sprinkler systems. They have just overall, they have less skeletons in the closet. And so that's what we now start to look for from a construction point of view. From a demographic point of view, we obviously, I spoke a little bit about where the current demographic is at and where we want to get it to. So that's another thing. And then making sure that there is meat on the bone, like just purely and simply down to how many units have been turned and how many are left on the bone. Has the leasing center been remodeled? Has it been rebranded? Is it still the same, Willow Oaks, at Reserve Creek, at Reserve Parkway, like some really old stuffy name that you really want to bring it up to being a modern, attracting that young tech millennial who is earning $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year. And then also understanding what the other comps are doing. So, one of the things that we're rolling out across all our portfolio is in particularly in Austin, not necessarily in San Antonio, is a what's called a partnet, which is it's a system that's like an amenity. So when you walk into a unit, you're not having to bring your own router anymore. It's the routers are already in the units. You literally log online. You get a login password, and you get technically it's not free internet, but it's high speed internet at a charge that we provide as an amenity. It's sort of an add-on, and it's all these sort of little bonuses and extra bits that we're bringing the multifamily game, the real estate game, try to bring into the 21st century, because ultimately, management and real estate has always lagged technology. And so trying to build that in a tech city goes hand in hand. So making sure like little things like keyless door hardware entry, on the units, the tech amenity that I just spoke about, the package that it's already, a lot of units or a lot of multifamily operators go and get bulk service contracts. But that still means that they've got to, the tenant's got to call up the service provider and get their router and all that sort of stuff. We have surpassed that and now have routers in all the units, and it costs us upfront money, but we get it on the back end, and we can get high-speed internet for lower than what they could go to the street and get it from the market. So these are the little things that we're doing and understanding from what our renter wants in order then to supply it from a value add point of view and a construction point of view.
And what, in terms of the size of deals that make sense for your model, what are you looking at typically?
It's got to be over 200, 100. Everyone says 150, but even now 150 is a little low. It's got to be, unless the 150, you're buying something a little bit smaller to work towards the downtown where it has maybe a highest and best use. So we're also looking at deals. The deal I just spoke about earlier back in, we all closed in early March, is it has a density, the highest and best use isn't the 284 units. It actually has a density ability we could go double that. Now, I'm not the one to go double that, but I could go from a value add point of view and get plans approved if and when that big, 1 million square foot office space is built in the next 3 to 5 years. We could go get plans approved to tear down the 284 units and build something different, like a podium project. I wouldn't build it, but that's the value add. I could sell it onto a developer as part of the value add. So now looking at different value add strategies, not just putting lipstick on a pig and trying to, get $200 rental pop on it, because those days are not necessarily gone, but those days are definitely, it's harder to squeeze that blood out of a stone. And
what about sort of pricing and rents below market? Like, you must have some kind of metric that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Because this value add has to work, right? You have to get that, $100 a month additional rent for your renovation project that you're talking about, just as you said a moment ago. So clearly that doesn't work with every deal. If it's like, priced already at the top of the market with rents at the top of the market, you can't do it. So, what are you looking at in terms of the existing, for lack of a better term, sort of the financial asset that you're buying when you're going into a deal?
So pre-COVID, and I think we're going to be in a different market coming out of COVID, but pre-COVID, it was looking at, people look at price per square foot, but we don't necessarily look at that because the tenant doesn't look at price per square foot. They look at, the whole check. What's my whole check for a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, or 2-bedroom, 2 bath, or 1-bedroom, 1 bath? So we want to definitely be in between the 10 to 15% below the market. And we don't ever want to get our ultimate renovated price to be way above it. We just want it to be sort of, at or at par with the market. The other thing is really important is making sure that you aren't higher than the new product that is coming to market, which is really, really important. Because again, we talked about that supply and demand issue before. We don't want to compete with the Class A. We want to be the best Class B or A- we can be for that particular product, whether it be late 80s or early 90s or early 2000s. So tenants will know you're not brand new. We know that. We're not trying to be brand new, but we're trying to, so we're not going to go and match, for example, a 1-bedroom, 1 bath in Austin in the markets we buy would go for about $1,500 a month, brand new, right? Where for a 1-bedroom, 1 bath, we're looking at $1,000. So there's still a significant delta between the two. And then we'll try and get that up to maybe $1,150 or $1,100. And then again, and then we're also looking at what does it cost for new home purchases in and around our area, right? What's an average mortgage? You can go buy a $500,000 house in Austin, probably not as close to downtown as some of our assets are. But if you were to go and buy, say it's a $800,000, $900,000 house, which is one of our assets is very close to that sort of stuff, you would be spending about $1,700-1,800 a month on a mortgage. So we don't want our rent to be above that. And a lot of our tenants actually leave our property when they come for renewals. And the reason is that they're going to buy houses. So we want to be in that last step or last stone or last along the path towards home ownership, that, you know, we are that last rental that they'll ever have. So, and not all our tenants are going to go and buy buy houses. They might rent for the rest of their life, but that's sort of, we want to look at that part as well. So what's the average mortgage rate in that particular submarket that we would have to compete with if someone would see, you don't have mortgages at $1,500 and you're trying to sell a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for $1,800. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because someone could just go out and buy a house. So you want to be below a couple of those metrics as well.
What about the renovations themselves? Now, you already mentioned sort of what you're spending per door, but what are you, how long are your projects taking to reposition? How are you kind of forecasting that and underwriting that when you're buying the deal?
Yeah, really good question. So historically we were blow and go, meaning you'd come in, you would try and do 10 to 15 units a month, but we just noticed the vacancy was just dropping to like a stone, and it's hard to get it out. So sort of that J curve. In somewhere like Austin, Texas, we actually do a more slow and steady wins the race. We will extend that renovation time. Your model may be 18 months, right, to do 100 units or two, it wouldn't be 200 units, but if we're doing more than 6 units a month, we're doing too much. Right. So we want to keep it at, so the occupancy, the natural occupancy can be at sort of 93 to 95%, given, like, say, it's a 280 unit property. And then you've got that nice, that natural vacancy is enough to then go and turn, as I said, 4 to 6 units a month. If you're doing more than, and maybe when you first buy it, you might have a little bit more. You might, do the first 10 in the month, but you then slow down over time. And from a modeling point of view, you want to make sure that you're backing into that. So if you're thinking it's going to take 18 months to do 100 units, well, you're up the creek, because it takes a lot longer to do 100 units in more than 18 months. It was more like 24 to 36 months. So you've got to make sure your model reflects that. And we've seen, we want to keep that rent, that occupancy higher, because we don't want the vacancy to come in and obviously ultimately affect revenue. The big thing we also see is the rental growth on the existing renewals. So when someone comes to renew their lease, what is that percentage of renewals that are, first and foremost, are wanting to re-sign with the property? And secondly, how much are you getting on an average pop? Just without doing anything to the unit, meaning you just made the amenities better, for example. And typically on our assets, we're seeing anywhere between 5 to 7% renewal rate. Rate on the rent increases, and then we're seeing about 50 to 60% of all potential renewals wanting to re-sign with the asset. So, that's a good reflection on property management. It's a good reflection on what we're doing from a renovations point of view. So understanding what you are currently at, and then where say 12 months down the track, comparing to where you were, to see that you want to see that renewal rate going up for rental increases, but also you want to see that consistent 50 to 60% of people wanting to renew at the asset.
So if you're getting natural rent increase as you go, anyway, from improving management or amenities or just the improving demographic of the property, plus you're also, if you're renovating, you're getting the 12%. If you renovate a property, are you actually then, with the natural increase, getting more of like a 17% increase, like the natural plus the forced, or is it really, are you capped at basically that forced appreciation? So your decision-making process on a particular unit is, okay, is it worth the effort to get the additional 5% from renovating that I would just get from, I wouldn't have to do anything. Like, explain that to me.
Yeah. So that's a very good question, and it's very academic, right? Like you take a snapshot of the property as a model today, and you go submit an offer, right? And you use that model to set the budget for the first 12 months with your property management. After that, it's sort of like they will use that first 12 months of operations to then set year 2, and year 2 will set year 3. And you're trying to be, obviously your model might be more aggressive than what the property management model is, but that will, it's really that first 12 months, you'll be able to determine, well, okay, how many units do we turn? What was the average rental increase? And then we can check, okay, well, what's the renewal rate? 9 times out of 10, or 9.9 times out of 10, that your renewal rate won't be as much as your renovated product. And that renovated product will always be the maximum you're going to get, right? It actually might come, we've seen, like, we're now starting to track all of our second generation models, renovations, meaning they've already been touched, let's say 2 years ago. They're now back in the leasing pool, and you'll see, okay, you've got a big pop on the front end, but it might come down, $25 a month because it's not brand new anymore, right? So that's where you sort of leave other things up your sleeve, like the keyless door hardware entry. You might bring that in year 2. So you have sort of a cherry on the top to when you're leasing to a prospective tenant or doing the property tour. You're like, oh, we just put in these new keyless door hardware entry locks, and then you walk into a renovated product which actually is 2 years old. So yeah,
I'm just kind of trying to get at, like, whether you come up with a situation where, like, you actually think, hey, it's not actually worth me doing the renovation, because why would I spend that capital? Because I'm going to get this much of a rent bump doing nothing at all, except just turning the apartment.
Look, at the end of the day, it's all about growing the NOI. And again, pre-COVID, people, the brokers, like, and I'm talking the last 12 months pre-COVID, people were saying, oh, leave meat on the bone. And it's like, screw that, get the NOI up as high as you can. Like that's ultimately what's going to sell. And so on the back end, like we've spoken to brokers where, like, we can sell a value add product for 4.5 cap, but if you've done it all, we can only sell it for a 5.25 cap. And you go do the math, and if you can increase your NOI in that same hold period by, say, 20 or 30%, then that's going to offset that difference in cap rate when you come to sell, and you get more cash flow along the way. Your investors are happy, and thus when you sell, you might have not as a bigger proceeds on the back end, but you've had a better cash flow along the way, and you've able to. There's no, like, hiding stuff in the financial. Like, no, this is what the freaking NOI is, and thus, because we've jammed 80% of the units, and okay, you got less to say, you got less for you, the next buyer. But here's a special sauce. In 5 years' time, after I sell it, there's going to be units that I've renovated in year 1 of my operations. It's going to need to be renovated again after 5 years. So it's another value add anyway. So yeah.
So, and then on the financing side, how are you financing these renovations? If you're now doing it over like a 36-month period, is this through debt, through equities, through some combination of the two? How do you do that?
So we do, depending on what each deal is different, and depending on what they qualify for. The best one I like is going out and get an agency loan on the purchase, and then we raise the capex ourselves, and then we do a supplemental in, say, year 3 to release more funds. We have done the other way. We've done bridge, and we've got a couple of deals with bridge, but I've still over-raised, or still at least underwritten it as if I was going to raise the whole capex by myself. Now, what that does, you're saying, oh, well, that's going to screw the IRR, and it does. But the fact is, I have then capital on hand. So hence come COVID issues like this, we can pause the renovations and have cash on hand without using renovation dollars over at the bank, right? It's now our dollars, and we can say, well, we over-raised for an operating account, or we over-raised for an operating account plus, say, the first $1 million of renovations. Well, I have money now to go and help these particular issues that crop up that no one really foresees that you need. And in that same breath, I've also stopped all renovations, right? Because I know that, back to your point of, like, the rental pop, and on one of our assets we closed in September last year in Austin, it's the asset which has the most residents that are going to be affected by COVID. And so our property management team's like, hey, Reed, I know you've done 20 units. I suggest completely stopping, because we don't want to go spend those dollars and not get the rental pop, right? You don't get a second bite of the cherry. You don't get to say, okay, well, I renovated it again, like I said before, and okay, I got a $50 increase, and I've spent $8,000. That's not a good ROI. I don't then get, when that tenant moves out, I don't get to then go and jam $150 onto it just because it was renovated a year ago. Again, people know if it's freshly renovated. So hence why you then go and stop the renovations, and you have capital on your side, which means that you can hopefully force, ride out this wave of uncertainty.
So that's obviously a great segue into what's going on today. So I'd love it if you could talk a bit about how, as an owner, as opposed to somebody who's looking to buy real estate, but as an existing owner, how it is that you're dealing with, this completely unprecedented out of left field event that nobody expected to happen. What's going on?
So for all the listeners, for all the people on this call, we've historically always, back to just quickly, and we'll close the loop on, when you underwrite a deal, to over raise for an operating account and for your own CapEx, if you can do that. Even if you can get bridge, you don't want to be just scraping across the line to get the deal closed and then go and trying to raise the renovations later. No, screw that. You want to be over raising today. It does lower your IRR, but that's okay because you've got more cash on hand. And as we're seeing in the stock market and people valuing different companies, they want to see how much cash you have on hand. The more cash you have on hand, the better it is for you to ride out any of these uncertainties that we're now facing. So now let's talk about COVID. So if you've underwritten well and you've got cash on hand, fantastic. You can then go and make decisions wisely about what's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months. First and foremost, on the actual, we're still in our houses, and my personal opinion is that the longer we are in our houses, the more this is going to hurt me or hurt the business. Right now, April's collections were actually pretty good. We're above, on an average, above 96% collected across all our assets. There was one asset that was at 92%, which was the one I just spoke about. We closed on it last year. We're sort of in that middle of transitioning that sort of $40,000 to $50,000 income to that $60,000 to $70,000. And that was the asset that had the most amount of tenants reach out to us and say, we might have an issue paying either April or May's rent or both. So what we did when it sort of all, when stuff hit the fan, not trying to swear, that was back in late March. Our property management company got in front of it. We sent out emails to all our tenants saying, look, we understand we want to keep you safe and healthy first and foremost. So we're going to have to start shut down the leasing center. We have to start shut down the amenities. We want to help you try and pay, April's rent on time, or at least, some sort of payment plan for the month of April. And a lot of people are like that, like the fact that we'll get being proactive with it. Now coming it to the end of April, we were surprisingly to see that we didn't have any issues with all of our assets. We were easily able to pay the debt. So coupled with obviously sending out the correspondence to the tenants, I was also talking to the banks and saying, hey, look, don't know what's going to happen, but this is what I'm doing right now in order to get in front of it. And they appreciated that. We came I pushed all my ACH payments out to the 10th of the month. So I had time, to collect some rent and see where our line of sight was to the finish line. And sort of come the 5th or the 6th, I was able to call them all and say, look, headline news is that we will make all our debt payments this month. We have no issues. You've always got to plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? So they were very supportive of that. We think going into May will be better because we have applied for the PPP and we've got it. But we do think that through all the tracking on all the individual assets that all our property managers have done. So when we send out that correspondence, a lot of tenants reached back out to us, and we recorded those tenants. Some people were just reaching out just to get information, and they ultimately paid April on time. They paid April in full. But some of those tenants went on the payment plans, and some of those tenants say, I might even have issues paying May. So now we're at a stage where we're sitting at the 25th of the month. The second round of this payment plan that we implemented, so the payment plan was you pay 50% by, I think it was the 12th, and then the remaining 50% by the 24th, where we're sitting, yesterday was the 24th. We will have a very, very small amount. I'm talking like less than 0.05% of our 1,900 units of tenants that will bleed over into May. And what that will means is that we've now got to come up with a secondary payment plan to say, okay, you have an existing balance for April. You need to pay this off over every week over the next, whatever it is, 2 to 3 months. So that's currently how we're trying to, manage the situation. On the bright side, I do think that this whole virtual leasing it's forcing us to be innovative. And going back to what I was saying earlier about like how property management and some of the real estate world is a little slow with tech. This has been a great wake-up call to say, okay, how can we actually lease better online? How can we make our online footprint and our online marketing better? And that may be in turn, in sort of 2 or 3 years' time, we might be able to reduce the payroll on the staff because we don't need as many staff sitting in the office if you've got really good videos of your renovated product. this is the sort of, I'm trying to think of the glass half full. So all these things are going on the asset. We're obviously stopped all the renovations. We, from a business point of view, we have stopped distributions to investors, and investors understand that. And really, we're just sort of, this is a massive issue. We have 22 million people or something unemployed, and this is going to affect us. And we are in the medium to low cost housing space. So yes, our tenants are the ones who live paycheck to paycheck. They're the ones who are going to be hurt first. And goes back to my original comment of saying, the longer we're in our houses, the longer this is going to hurt. And so the only saving grace of this whole entire thing, and given my international perspective, is that this is applying worldwide. You've got owners in Australia, in Europe, in England, in South Africa, and Canada who are wanting rent, as of April, and they're talking to their own banks, and we're all at the same playing field. It's a level playing field. The interesting thing will be is that when we do get the green light, how individual cities, not even individual countries, but how individual cities get out of the starting gates. And what I mean by that, when a sporting team's going to come back, when a music festival is going to come back, when is travel starting again, when do restaurants and bars start opening again, that is all going to matter in your individual assets, how it recovers and how we, is it more of a slow recovery like the Nike swoosh that everyone keeps talking about? I don't think it's going to be a V-shaped recovery at all. I think it's going to be prolonged. So a lot of information there, but I think it's covered from the A to Z, I think.
Well, if you said before, sort of hope for the best and plan for the worst. If you're taking that mindset, what is your plan going forward? If you do assume that things, this lasts longer than people are thinking, or at least longer than they really, they can tolerate, how are you, you've already mentioned just sort of garnishing cash, which I think makes a lot of sense. Anything else that you're like trying to get out ahead of this issue that you're, as an asset manager, that you're,
like the garnishing cash is a big one. Constantly being in communications with my on-site managers, really every other day or every day, with my regional manager, talking to my banks constantly, having those relationships. It's really all about the relationships. And look, at the end of the day, Jonathan, it is an unknown. We've never been in this sort of situation. It's really interesting, somewhat a little scary at some points, but you got to realize it's out of it. There's only so much you can do before it's out of your control. You know what I mean? Like you want to help the tenants. We're not, there's no evictions right now in the state of Texas for, I don't think till like middle of May, I think, or end of May, they're not starting evictions back up again. So coming with that sort of human first mentality, given that we are still in the heat of it, we're not out of the fire yet. And until we get that we can leave our houses, then I think we can start pivoting into looking like what's going to happen moving forward. I think from an acquisitions point of view, everyone on this call is licking their lips and is thinking that, it's a 2008 all over again. I think there will be some good buying opportunities, but I don't think it's going to be, the best buying opportunities in 2008, 2009 wasn't 2008, 2009. It was actually 2010, 2011. So real estate will be slower to react. You'll see single family house prices, particularly in sort of like places like New York and here in LA, where people can't get out and view houses. So probably the sales volume is going to go down, and ultimately the sales price will be impacted. So that's going to have a big impact on consumer sentiment. So overall, I think for the short term, we're going to be in a bit of crap. I think there's going to be potentially some keys handed back to the banks on some multifamily deals. If you've got access to those sort of stuff, great. There will be some buying opportunities. I've definitely seen, we were looking at deals in January that were at, 30 or 40 million bucks. And, their whisper price was, let's say $40 million. And then, come now March where offers were due or best and final, they're saying they'll take $32 million for it. So we already can start to see it. We've seen deals completely taken off the market. From our point of view of underwriting, we're definitely discounting everything. So no rent growth at all in year one. Making sure that I don't think you'd even plan to do renovation pops in year one. It really have to start in sort of year 2 and year 3. The increased vacancy, increased bad debt, and you probably have to increase your concessions to try and attract the renters back to the market. So all those things are going to impact your underwriting and thus going to impact the purchase of whatever you're trying to look at.
Yeah. When you were talking before about the way that your model has operated up until now, you kept on qualifying it with saying, well, that's pre-COVID, that's pre-COVID. How you may not really have had much of a chance to think about going forward because you've been in the thick of just dealing with your existing properties. But to the extent that you have been able to think about when you do return to acquisitions mode and you're like, everything is stable and you can start thinking about expanding again. How is it going to change, do you think? I know this is probably just off the top of your head, so I won't hold you to this, but what are you thinking in terms of your model, how it's going to need to respond?
I think in general, you have to be very conservative with your modeling now. As I was saying, I keep saying pre-COVID because we were in a very frothy, you sort of rose tinted glasses maybe with your modeling. Now it's sort of just like you've got to discount the hell out of it. You'll see when you start to look at T12s, looking at as deals start to come back onto the market, looking at T3, how did individual deals do? And ultimately keeping those broker relationships very fresh, because there will be people that were thinking about selling deals and maybe have pulled back from the market, but they've still already started having conversations with the brokers. They haven't gone out to the public yet. And those brokers might be able to shop a few of them around and say, hey, are you interested in this? And it's like, well, we are, but we're interested in it at a discount because we just don't know how long this is going to take. And this is right now today as of April 25th. Ask me in 3 months' time, it'll probably be a different question. Ask me in 6 months' time, will probably be a different answer. So yeah, that's really what we're doing.
Have you, I mean, but just sort of thinking out ahead of this, in terms of the renovations and stuff, is that going to be a model that in the short term, and I mean like in the next, say, 3 years, right? Is that going to be a model that you think is going to be viable, or are you going to need to switch to more of a kind of coupon clipping, kind of looking for a deal that you can, rather than investing so much CapEx on sort of speculating that you're going to get the pops? Does it become more conservative overall, not just in terms of your underwriting?
Yeah, I think
strategy.
Yes, I think the short answer is yes. But if I look at some of just even as soon as recently as last week, like on Thursday, I had my call with my Austin team. We had 3 new leases on one of our assets, and the average rental increase over prior was over $200 on newly renovated product. Now, that is one small data source. I think overall, yes, you are correct, but that's where you can if you can stagger your model in terms of, and when I say model, your underwriting, to make sure if you want to turn off the renovations and you just sort of, you got a GPR, gross potential rent of what it is currently in the T12, just sort of continuing that into the first year of your ownership. And then maybe in year 2, you start to, add those renovations back in. It also goes back to the fact that looking at what your comps are. Now, if you happen to get a home run deal that just in general, your average rent on an asset is $200 or $300 less than the market. Well, if the market drops $100 or $150 and you only want to come up $100, well, there's still a very good thesis there for an investment that you could go and do renovations.
You're building in a margin of safety there, but I think that's where you have to be looking now, particularly, right? That is really thinking very seriously about how you build in that margin of safety.
Exactly.
On any kind of whatever your particular investment model is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to price that into whatever you're going to buy.
100%. Yep.
Cool. Well, so I'm going to open this up to questions from the people in the audience. I have one that's teed up here, and please drop them into the chat or the Q&A if you've got questions. Let's see. So Amanda is asking, I'll read this to you and you can react to it. I currently own 2 triplexes and a duplex in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs, she says. So all were distressed properties that we've repositioned to Class B or higher over the last 5 years, with success due to the housing demand, qualified renters in the rising Saratoga market. So it sounds similar to what you're doing. Can you share how you got your first big break, i.e. your first large multiplex deal, because she and her husband are looking to transition to that next step? How did you raise the capital to do it? How were you able to leverage equity that you'd built into your previous properties, raise money from other investors, et cetera? So how did you do it, and how did you get the money to do it?
Short answer is when rewinding all the years back to 2012, 2013, I was in a similar boat as this particular person comes from, and that's I had to learn about syndication. And obviously you're on these calls and understanding it. But the big thing for me was go out and find a mentor who was doing it. So then I could partner with that mentor and build my credibility. I built my own podcast from scratch. So really focusing on surrounding yourself with people who are already doing the business and partnering with those people. Secondly, making sure you have the pumps primed with your investors. So what are you doing to tell your story? And for me, it was my podcast that I started, and, I'd moved from Australia and blah, blah, blah. Everyone wanted to hear it. And I niched and was focusing towards the international investors and really making sure that pool of investors was primed, ready for me to come and offer them or show them deals. I can still vividly remember the first deal that I partnered with my mentor on. I went and approached 50 or 60 investors and only 3 of them invested. Like, it sort of was a cold shower in terms of how my perceived thought that my investor group was ready or trusted me was well out the window, because I just hadn't spent enough time cultivating those relationships. Now, over time, that gets better and better and better. That's why when you do go take down a bigger deal, it maybe is bigger, and maybe it's a 30 unit or 40 unit, but bringing in people who you can JV the deal with, and everyone can raise a little bit of money, or bring in some sort of value to the project, because it is going to be hard with that first deal that you do go out there. If you've done it all by yourself, and then all of a sudden you just start to say, hey, I need to raise $1 million. And it's like, well, that might be 20 investors. Well, those 20 investors, you probably have to go to 100 investors or 200 investors to get those 20 investors. So where is that investor database? If you don't have an investor database, build one. Start building one. Who's in your phone? Like, who can you call? You can just say, look, my friends and family are going to be probably the first ones who are going to invest with me. Can they recommend anyone? And so it's a period of time. It won't just happen. It's not a big break. It's a concerted effort, I should say, in making sure I was building a really good investor database through podcasting, through telling my story. And it happened over a period of years. It didn't happen just instantly. And it was coupled with, going out and getting a coach and partnering with him on deals that he was doing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. As long as I've known you, I don't think I actually ever knew this piece of it, that those sort of first 50, 60 investors that you had, that you thought you were going to raise money from, where did they come from? Did they come through your podcast, or was that before the podcast?
Yeah, it was. So yeah, definitely focused on the podcast first. And it was through literally just using my phone and looking at my contacts in my phone and emailing those contacts and emailing them example pitch decks. And a lot of people saying, what the hell are you doing? Like, I didn't realize I thought you were a structural engineer, like changing people's mindset. And it was just a lot of conversations, a lot of coffee, and you feel like you're spinning your wheels. You feel like you're going nowhere. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to focus and know that building a solid investor group or investor database will take years. And that you need I don't want to say megaphone, but you need something in order to educate them consistently, i.e. a podcast, a blog, a monthly newsletter, whatever you resonate with, to tell them your story and to tell them what you're doing. Because if you don't, ultimately at the end of the day, as a syndicator, as a person that raises capital from other people, it is your responsibility to educate those folks about what you do. And for me, the response from my group was that I wasn't doing a good enough job, right, in the beginning. So I need to go double down on that. You need to look at yourself and think, okay, well, do I have even 50 people? Look at my phone. Have I spoken to people in my phone about what I'm doing? If you're just thinking, I'm just going to go out and buy a 30-unit property and I need to raise $2 million, well, hang on. Have you had any conversations with anyone about what you're doing currently? And if the answer is no, then you need to start having those conversations.
Yeah, it's just like I always tell people, you have to dig the well before you need the water, right?
Exactly.
Because if you wait till you're thirsty, first of all, you're going to be digging furiously and you're probably going to die of thirst in the middle of doing it, right? So you need to start that a lot earlier. But when you kind of like reverse engineered the situation, why was your conversion rate so low, do you think, on that first group?
Bad pitching, not confident in how I was pitching, asking people for money, not necessarily presenting them an opportunity, a myriad of issues that I get comfortable in your own skin. You haven't done it before. Like there's all the anxieties you get from taking that leap of faith and taking your business to the next level, but knowing that the hardest time is going to be your first time. The next time is going to be better. The time after that's going to be even better. And so it will start to snowball. And that's where the power of having a mentor, power of having other partners who have other skill sets and coming together. And you may take a smaller piece of the deal, but I'd rather have a smaller piece and you get involved. in a bigger deal. See, the other thing is, it's not about the money you make on this next big deal. Talk about taking that next leap. It's just about getting your foot in the door. Once you close on a 50 unit or 100 unit or something bigger than what you're currently doing today, you then have the permission, because you've mentally, to go out and do bigger and better deals. But it won't happen. Don't focus on what you are going to make on the first deal. Focus on what your investors are going to make. And just, you may own 5% of the deal or less, but it's getting your foot in the door, and it's that snowball effect. And so,
it's 5% of something is better than 100%
better than nothing,
right? So,
exactly.
Yeah, getting started. So another question just came up from Deepika, which is, what do you suggest to improve your ability to pitch to investors?
So I don't want to sound too salesy, but I do have a little formula that I kind of created just through observing people. I coined it the 6P rule. It started with 4 Ps, but I had to add another P into it. And it really starts with professionalism. The first P, and the professionalism is really that we are all are not born with 15 or 20 years worth of real estate experience or business experience. And so we all have a journey. We all have a story, but being punctual, dressing correctly, making sure you're on time. These things are all professionalism that you can someone can see that you're on your game, right? So that's the first P. The second P is pitching, making sure you do have a good pitch. And I speak a little bit about how to pitch how to pitch well.
Pitch good.
We'll do real good. How to pitch well. And I speak a little bit about, in some of the webinars I've done on it, the whole Martin Luther King, I have a dream speech. Now he would have pitched that speech thousands of times before he got on the Washington Monument. And it's about pitching a lot of people. And you have to develop your pitch, right? And I've got a little formula about that. I won't get into it now. So there's pitching. There's a profile. How's your online profile look? Taking a selfie on your LinkedIn, that's not going to work. Go get out and get professional headshots. Have a professional website. Take yourself seriously, because people are going to Google you. So there's profile. There's also there's a platform. What platform we spoke about the podcast? What platform are you going to use to go out and start sharing a message? And we spoke about, newsletters and podcasts and videos, and you can have books. That's all sort of on one end of the scale, but you can just start by having conversations over coffee. You maybe start by having a monthly dinner or a monthly lunch with some folks in your local neighborhood that you just want to start talking about real estate with. These are all platforms that you're using to spread your word. So that's the platform. Then the practice part, well, it's just taking, what you learned in those pitching, those other Ps, and cultivating a example pitch deck, and making sure you're getting that pitch deck in front of people and showing them exactly the A to Z of how you're going to go raise money, how people are going to get paid, what the deals you're looking at, and how you're going to structure it, and how their money's protected. That is all in a physical document that you can give to them. So that's the practice part of it. And the last P is patience. This will take time. People, like anything, people don't have the fundamental thing that I believe is that when people fail at something or give up, is because they went into it thinking that they're going to get somewhere sooner than what they actually did, right? So if you go in and think, I'm going to lose 30 pounds in a month, and you get to the end of the month and you haven't lost anything, well, you're going to give up? Of course you're going to give up. If you're going to go, anything worth doing will take time. So financial freedom, building a business, you've got to go into this thinking it's going to take more than 5 years. Plain and simple. If you think you can, people out there pitching, you can get financially free in 12 months or 6 months, a load of BS in my mind. I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2009. It took me over a decade to get to where I am today. And it's in the old Tony Robbins adage of, you can overestimate what you can achieve in a year, but you can underestimate what you can achieve in a decade. And it will take a lot of time. It's going to be you'll get some dark times thinking I'm spinning my wheels and I'm not going anywhere. But that's where the patience comes in. And that's where you've got to have the mental ability to know that it may take 5, 6, 10 years. And that's okay. That's okay that takes that long. So, yeah.
An old business mentor of mine used to frequently say that the reason people quit, like the reason entrepreneurs quit, is not because it's hard. It's because they thought it was going to be easy.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
And I think if you go into it with thinking this is going to be easy, then, you're bound to be disappointed. And I think you give up a lot more easily. So Reed, this has been really great. We got about 5 minutes left to this session. Is there anything that we haven't really touched upon yet that you would like to leave the audience with?
I think we touched on a lot here. If there's any more questions, I'm always willing to, jump on a quick phone call or whatever, I'm more than happy to do it. And for any of those folks who are out there who ever come through LA, anytime that, we get let back on planes, you can always hit me up, and I'm sure Jonathan has all the information that you can reach out to me at. So, yeah.
Yeah, you want to just drop your website or whatever?
Yeah, just jump onto reedgoossens.com, reedgoossens.com, and there's you can contact me. It's pretty simple. Or you can just hit me up at info at reedgoossens.com. So yeah.
And what's your podcast?
Investing in the US. It's a very simple podcast. We've been going for about 4 years now. It is real estate focused, but we've now pivoted into a little bit more of talking to entrepreneurs and business owners and startups and CEOs about how they built something from nothing, with a focus in and around real estate somewhat. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Reed, thanks again for taking the time on a Saturday. I know you probably have lots of other places that you had to go today. And
we're in lockdown. Where are we going?
All right. Well, thanks so much. And so we're just waiting for, thanks again, Reed. So we're just waiting for our next